morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. This is the best of Frankly Speaking. We've got a lot of great guests from shows past, such as Don McLean. Remember that interview? The great song, American Pie, written by Don McLean. We'll talk with him. And then Duane Eddy will be coming up, and other special guests. So you'll have to stay tuned. As always, you can reach out to me with any questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Please reach out at any time. I would love to hear from you if you have any suggestions for guests in the future. We are out best of this morning, so you can't really ask these people questions, but in the future, of course, you can, as we have a lot of local guests as well as national guests and regional guests. You never know who will be on, Frankly Speaking. So we're going to take our first break, and then when we come back, we'll hear from Don McLean. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We're going to take a look back at some of our best interviews throughout the few months that we've been on the air since March. This first interview up is with the legendary Don McLean, the author of American Pie. So let's take a look at that interview. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are being joined by the legendary Don McLean. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on your show.
I've got to say, first and foremost, congratulations on the Music City Walk of Fame, because you got in with our mutual friend, Duane Eddy, who was born right here in Corning, New York.
Well, I just love Duane. He was on several tracks of an album called Love Tracks.
Mm-hmm. He's a great guy, isn't he? Yes. That's wonderful.
He really is.
Now, we're going to be talking about your upcoming show on November 11th, Struthers Library Theater in Warren, Pennsylvania. But before that, I understand that you released a Christmas album, Christmas Memories, remixed and remastered. There's so many great Christmas songs. How do you pick the track list?
Well, I got to find ones that I can sing.
Okay. Well, that's fair.
I've got to like the song.
Sure. Do you have a favorite Christmas song on that album?
Winter Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Okay.
And White Christmas.
Of course, White Christmas. Now, when
I like the version of Blue Christmas, because it goes in and out of major and minor.
Okay. Now, it's got to be an interesting experience as we near Christmas that you could be sitting around the Christmas tree listening to your own music.
Well, I have about 5 Christmas trees in my house. So I have to do a lot of sitting.
Yes. And you can buy an autographed copy now at donmclean.com. So you've got this upcoming show. Let me ask you this simple question. What is a typical Don McLean concert like?
I sing the American Songbook.
Okay.
I do my songs.
Mm-hmm.
I do other songs that I've recorded by other people.
Okay.
And, crying.
Mm-hmm.
Since I Don't Have You, Castles in the Air, Vincent, American Pie.
Of course.
And I Love You So, these kind of things.
And, of course, you mentioned that seminal song, American Pie. Did you know, I don't think there's any way you could know, that 50 years later it would be the powerhouse that it still is, being in movies and TVs, etc.?
I never thought about anything. I never thought about the future. I never was worried about what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I just kept putting one foot in front of the other.
Well, what was it like for you when it hit, when you had that experience that you knew that this was a major, major song?
It was fun for about 2 weeks. And then it became a whole new way of life.
Sure.
Because you're not a person anymore.
Oh, that's a good
You're
point.
certainly not the person you were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you...
People treat you differently, and and they don't tell you the truth.
Sure.
You know, they say everything's wonderful, you know,
Yeah.
and it isn't.
Right.
So,
That's interesting. Now, do you think today, in 2023, that a 8.5-minute song could be a hit?
I think it could be a rap song.
Oh, sure.
You know, I think if rap music would stop rapping and come to a chorus once in a while, that they might have a lot, a crossover into a whole other world.
Sure. And are you surprised that you have had such an influence on rappers and specifically American Pie being sampled so frequently?
Well, there's that, and there's the Drake song "Do It Wrong" that used two of my songs.
Right.
And then there's the Tupac Shakur "Love of Vincent" and my other work as well. So it thrills me.
Yeah. Do you, when you hear that there's a cover or, like I said, a rapper using some of your music, what does that feel like to you? Because I got to imagine your songs are kind of like your babies, right? So does it bother you?
They're out there, you know.
Yeah.
and anything can happen to your babies.
Sure. Well, that's true.
You know, they're living their life.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, another recent part of your life is the movie The Day the Music Died, the story of Don McLean's American Pie. What does that feel like for you personally to have a movie dedicated to you and to your song?
It's a really good movie for people who are interested in me and the song. Because it really documents my journey throughout the 10 years before I recorded the song.
Right.
And that's the most important 10 years of my life.
And that can be found at Paramount Plus, The Day the Music Died, the story of Don McLean.
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon.
Oh, okay. Purchase it on Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure you can find out more at donmclean.com. So we mentioned that your Music City Walk of Fame, obviously Grammy Award honoree, Songwriters Hall of Fame. Is there one of the awards that you've received that is the most special to you?
Well, they're all special.
Sure.
You know. But the Musicians Hall of Fame, and which was this year as well,
Oh, right.
was really a big deal because the people in it were the major people that built the Nashville music scene. So that was a real honor for them to include me.
So obviously we talked about the Christmas album, the movie. You've got the concert coming up at Struthers Library Theater, Warren, Pennsylvania on November 11th. So what's next for Don McLean?
Well, I've got a few more shows. And then I'm going to sing for a couple of nights in Hawaii.
Oh, very nice.
And then I'm taking a few months off. And then I'm going to be on a romance cruise.
Oh, very nice. Now,
yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, that sounds great. So it sounds like you stay very busy.
Yeah, and then I relax a lot. You know, I got to get myself back together again.
Sure. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, just before we wrap up, two very, very corny questions, and I admit it right from the jump. Are you only allowed to drive Chevys?
You know, I've just got a GMC truck, so that's as close to a Chevy as I've ever had.
Is that right? Oh,
I like this truck.
Yeah. Okay, and the final corny question. American Pie, such a legacy, such an amazing song. But come Thanksgiving, what is your go-to pie?
What's my go-to pie? Well, I have two favorites. Lemon meringue made right, and pumpkin.
And pumpkin, of course. Well, see, there you go.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for letting me lose my credibility with those last two questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hate mincemeat.
Okay, there we go. Well, Don McLean has been our guest again. Struthers Library Theater, Warren, Pennsylvania, November 11th. Thank you for being on the show today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye. We'll be right back with Frankly
Bye,
Speaking
bye.
after this. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Coming up next on our best of edition of Frankly Speaking is Richard Sturban from the Oak Ridge Boys. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I am honored to be joined by Richard Sturban from the Oak Ridge Boys. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Well, Frank, it's my pleasure to be able to talk to you and all your fine viewers out there. I'm certainly looking forward to it.
Well, what do you think it is? Because I just read that you celebrated your 50th year as an Oak Ridge Boy. Why do you think you've lasted so long?
Well, I think there are several reasons for that. I think first and foremost, it's the fact that we love doing what we do. That's first and foremost. Even after 50 years, we still look forward to getting on stage, taking our music live to our fans and to our audiences. That has not changed. And so that's a main factor. I think there's a special relationship that exists between the four of us, where each band is different. Each man brings something different to the table, so to speak, but I think that's part of our appeal as well. And I think over the years, we've learned to respect that difference. We become the best of friends, and I think we realized a long time ago that we need each other. So we pulled together as a team.
Right.
We're a true brotherhood. We also love the creative process of recording new music. We're now being produced by a gentleman named Dave Cobb.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's got to be such an honor.
If you're familiar with the music scene in Nashville, he's one of the hottest guys in town.
Yeah.
He really is. And he's producing the Oak Ridge Boys now, and we're creating new music. That's very exciting. So new music puts new life and new energy into us. So that's part of the factor as well. Our history, I think, is a big part of it. We've got history like no other group in the music business, I think. It goes back to the Second World War. There was a group known as the Georgia Clodhoppers. This is a fact. They would go to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and actually entertain the people there and the kids and everything that they were stationed there because they could not leave for security reasons, because they were working on top secret stuff. They were, working on the development of the atomic bomb.
Wow.
It was called the Manhattan Project. Wow. And the Georgia Clodhoppers had a security clearance. They could go in. As a result of going all the time, they changed their name to the Oak Ridge Quartet. Wow. And I think that's a group that needed a name change, probably.
Yes.
And the group became regulars on the Friday Night Grand Ole Opry here at the old Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. And then later on, the guys left the group and younger guys took the group over. They changed the name to Oak Ridge Boys, which we've obviously retained to this present day. William Lee Golden, he's the guy in our group with the long beard.
Yeah, of course.
He joined in 1965. Dwayne Allen, our lead singer, came 1 year later in 1966. I joined in 1972. I happened to be singing with the king of rock and roll back then. I was singing with Elvis.
Wow.
I left Elvis, joined the Oak Ridge Boys, and Joe came 1 year later in 1973. And our history is something that's really important to us, and we don't want it to end. So I think that's also another factor, and we don't plan to retire. We have to be realistic. We're probably going to slow down a little bit, but we're not going to retire. We're going to keep doing what it is that we love doing, and we're certainly looking forward to coming your way.
Yes, you're going to be at the Point of the Bluff Vineyards this Saturday. Find out more at oakridgeboys.com. And you mentioned the new album, Front Porch Singing. What goes in after being together for that many years? How do you know which songs to pick? Is it a session that you say, I want this song, almost like you're drafting in the NFL?
Well, I told you that we work with Dave Cobb.
Yeah.
And he's an exciting guy to work with, and he gets very involved in the selection process of material. And he called us. We actually recorded this project a few years ago during the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
All the studios were closed down, but he called us and he said, I think we can record now. And he works at probably the most historic recording studio here in town, RCA Studio A. He works right out there. He works out of Chet Atkins' old office.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing, really. But he said, we can record. We just have to abide by the protocols, social distancing and all that stuff. He said, but what I want to do, I want to capture the feeling of four guys just gathering on a front porch and just singing in a very casual way, a very informal way. And so we said, let's try to find some songs that fit that criteria. And we found some old songs, some familiar songs that people will recognize, that they can sing along with, that work into this front porch singing format. And then Dave Cobb has a working relationship with some of the new young songwriters here in town. They wrote some brand new songs especially for us. So it's a nice mixture. It's a nice balance of old and new. But the most important thing, Dave Cobb, who's a genius, he captured that feeling of four guys gathering on a front porch in a very informal way. And on our show now, when we come your way, along with all the hits we're going to do, you can count on the fact you're going to hear me do Giddy Up, Boom, Papa, Mau Mau. That's going to happen. Along with all the hits, for a while, we're going to turn our stage into a front porch and do some of this music as well, because it's very inspirational kind of music, the kind of stuff we need to hear in this day and age with all the problems we have going on here in our country.
And that's why it's so fantastic that you recorded it during the height of COVID, because it must have meant even more to you at that time.
It really did. We for over a year, what we loved doing was kind of taken away from us. We couldn't get together, and finally we were able, after not having seen each other for several months, to get together in the studio. It was a special time. It was kind of like a celebration. It really was, and we're happy with the way it turned out.
That's great. I have to go back to a question that popped in my mind. You mentioned that you were playing with the King of Rock and Roll before joining the Oak Ridge Boys. You couldn't have known you'd be with the Oak Ridge Boys for 50 years. So was that a difficult decision to make?
Well, it was an interesting decision, the best way I can put it. Here I was, a young guy, apparently on top of the world, singing with the biggest star in the world back then, Elvis, the King of Rock and Roll. I get a phone call one day, and it's a phone call that changed my life. It was William Lee Golden of the Oak Ridge Boys. Now, he's the guy in our group with the long beard. He's probably the most recognizable character in the group. But back then, he did not have that long beard. He was Mr. GQ. He really was. But he called me and he said the bass singer in the Oak Ridge Boys was leaving the group, and the Oak Ridge Boys wanted to know if I would be interested in joining the group. So here I was, apparently on top of the world, singing with the King of Rock and Roll, but I had to make a decision, like, what do I do? And I have to admit that I was a big fan of the Oak Ridge Boys. I loved the music they were making. I collected their records, and I really felt like the group had a great deal of potential, and I wanted to be a part of it. So in 1972, I made a decision that actually changed my life. I left Elvis, joined the Oak Ridge Boys, and back then a lot of people questioned that decision. How could you do that? But I really believe deep down in my heart I was doing the right thing. And now 50 years later, when I look back on the great career we've had, I think I made a pretty good decision back then.
I would agree. It just must feel really strange for people to hear someone say they left Elvis. Do you know what I mean? That almost sounds, it doesn't sound like something you can do.
It doesn't sound like something that would be possible.
Yeah.
But I said I kind of followed my heart.
Yeah.
I really believed I was doing the right thing. And now 50 years later, I kind of
You're
look
right.
back and I think it was good. Back then when I was singing with Elvis, I was a young guy in my 20s, standing in the dark most of the time, oohing and eyeing and singing background harmonies. I never dreamed that someday I would actually be in the Country Music Hall of Fame together with Elvis. Here, and you never know how things happen in your life. But that's the way it happened with me personally. And if you walk into that rotunda here in the Country Music Hall of Fame, it's a very special place. You'll see the four faces of the Oak Ridge Boys in bronze. Look down the hall just a little ways, you'll see Elvis's face there in bronze, along with, Dolly Parton,
Sure.
Kenny Rogers, Johnny Cash, some of the biggest names ever in country music. For the Oak Ridge Boys to be there is a very special thing. But as I said, I never dreamed then when I was singing with Elvis that would have happened to me or the four Oak Ridge Boys. But we've been very fortunate, been very blessed.
We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking in the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. After this, please stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio. Let's return now to our conversation on the best of Frankly Speaking with Richard Sturban. When you mentioned the Country Music Hall of Fame, what did that mean to you when you got that extra acceptance by your peers?
Well, that is very there's not a higher honor. If you sing country songs for a living, there's not a higher honor than being inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. It's very special. When you look at that family of artists, it's mind-boggling. Right. You see our name mentioned with those people, there's not words to describe it hardly. It's so very, very special. The only thing that comes pretty close is a few years before that, we were inducted as members of the Grand Ole Opry. Now, that's also something that's very special here in Nashville. When we walk into that building and we see our name on the wall with all the other names, to be a part of that family of artists is also very special. And it's just kind of mind-boggling that we're members of both the Country Music Hall of Fame and the Grand Ole Opry.
And the history of the Grand Ole Opry, what was it like the night that you got inducted?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We were inducted by Little Jimmy Dickens.
Oh.
He's passed on
yes,
a few years
how
ago.
Perfect.
But he was a major member, of the Grand Ole Opry. And I remember, for several years we sang on the Opry, and we were not members. I remember one night we were singing on the Opry, and we just finished doing one of our songs. I think it was "Y'all Come Back Saloon" or something like that.
Yeah.
After the song, there was a lot of applause, but the applause continued. It would not stop, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. We looked around, and here came Little Jimmy Dickens walking out onto the stage.
Yeah.
He was dressed like William Lee Golden. He had this long gray beard, dark sunglasses, cowboy hat, And I think Joe said, "Little Jimmy, you look like you could be a member of the Oak Ridge Boys." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'm about to become a member of the Oak Ridge Boys because the Oak Ridge Boys are about to become members of the Grand Ole Opry." And I'll tell you, we all looked at each other, and I don't think we had a dry eye.
I can't believe
it was a very special experience, to say the least.
So I guess most people would ask, what's left to conquer? You guys have done it all.
Well, let me say this. We do not plan to retire.
Right.
We during the pandemic, I already mentioned this, during the pandemic, what we loved doing was taken away from us. Mm-hmm. We missed being the Oak Ridge Boys. We missed singing. We missed performing. But what we miss more than that is the feedback that we get from our fans. That's so important to us. And now that we're experiencing it again, we want it to continue. I think we have to be realistic. We're not kids any longer, but we're going to keep doing this as long as the good Lord above will allow us to do it, as long as we keep experiencing good health. And we're all feeling pretty good for our age. Right. We're going to keep doing it, and we do not plan to retire.
Well, you sound great. And I know there's always fan favorites. You mentioned Elvira, obviously. Do you have a favorite that you perform every night?
If I had to pick a favorite Oak Ridge Boys song, I would probably have to say one of our most requested songs, "Thank God for Kids." It was written by a good friend of ours named Eddie Raven, who is a great artist in his own right. And he actually wrote it for our first Christmas album. He said, I don't know if this song, he came into the studio one day, he said, I don't know if this song will fit what you guys are doing. He said, but I think it's a special song. We heard it, and we said, yes, we've got to record this song. And William Lee Golden every night sings that song, and he has a way about him. He knows how to interpret a lyric and then communicate the lyric to an audience. And he does that every night when he performs "Thank God for Kids." And you can tell when you look out there, you look into the audience, you can tell it's touching people. It's moving people. You know, see people hugging their kids, people holding hands, tears in people's eyes. You can tell it's a special moment. So if I had to try to answer your question, I would say William Lee Golden singing "Thank God for Kids."
Now I know since we scheduled this interview, I've had Elvira specifically stuck in my head. Do you ever get that song stuck in your head, or because you performed it so many times, as you know, it's second nature?
Well, the answer to your question is both.
Yeah.
Yes, I still sing it quite often, but it becomes second nature after a while. You know, we've done it for so many years. But I will say this. For me personally, one of the most fun things about that song, and it will happen again when we come your way, when we get to that song, and I get to that giddy up, boom, papa, mau, mau part, I love looking out into the audience and seeing most of the men trying to sing along with me. That's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. And the Oak Ridge Boys will be at Point of the Bluff Vineyards this Saturday. Just before we go, for anybody on the fence, what is a typical concert like with the Oak Ridge Boys?
Well, you're going to hear a lot of the songs that you expect to hear.
Right.
I already mentioned the fact you will definitely hear me do Giddy Up, Boom,
Sure.
Papa, Mau, Mau. That's the law. You know,
Yeah.
the Oak Ridge Boys have to sing.
Yeah, they have to.
But I already mentioned Thank God for Kids.
Right.
You know, our first hit ever, Y'all Come Back Saloon,
Exactly.
American Made. A lot of the songs you expect to hear will be on the show, the hit song. But we already talked about Dave Cobb, you know, producing Front Porch Singing.
Yeah.
For a while,
Right.
we're going to attempt to turn our stage into a front porch
great.
and sing some of those songs, because they're very meaningful songs. Right. They're very inspirational in nature. We're patriotic guys. We love this country. We'll honor our troops and our veterans. But just a good night of great country music and family entertainment. That's really what the Oak Ridge Boys are all about.
Just because you mentioned it, popped in my head. Do you think if you didn't play Elvira one night, there would be a riot?
I think we would be arrested. Probably.
Yes. Well, Richard Sturban, thank you.
I mentioned earlier, it's the law.
Yeah.
When the Oak Ridge Boys
It's
come
true.
down, they must sing Elvira.
Well, this has been great. Thank you for giving us so much time, and I can't wait to see the show at Point of the Bluff Vineyards this Saturday.
Well, Frank, thank you for promoting the fact that we're coming your way. When you do that, you help us, and we all appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, next time you're in the area, can I talk again with you?
Let's plan on it. Let's do it.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. As always, you can always contact me at the number on the bottom of the screen. This is the best of Frankly Speaking. And coming up next, we're going to hear from the legendary Hall of Famer, musician Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Steuben County Hall of Fame, because he was born in Corning, New York, Duane Eddy. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, and this is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, and we are joined by the legendary Duane Eddy. Duane, it's so good to see you.
Well, it's nice to be seen. At my age, it's nicer to be seen than viewed.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I know the show's relatively new, but we're broadcasting in the same area that you were born in. Tell us about your time in our area, and specifically being born in Corning, New York.
Corning, New York. I was always very proud of that because everywhere I'd go, and whenever they'd interview me and ask where I was born, I'd say Corning, and they'd say, "Where's that?" I said, "You know, Corning, New York, Corning glass." And wherever in the world is famous all over the world. So point any further.
Yeah. Yep. And you spent not as much time in Corning, but you've been grew up in the surrounding areas to a point, right?
Yeah, we lived in Corning for the first several years, and then we moved up to Bath for a few more years, and then on up to north of Branchport and Keokuk Lake,
Oh, sure.
west of Branch,
Yeah.
and Guy Road,
Yeah.
little crossroads.
Yeah. When you look back at your time in our area, what do you think of? What are the fond memories? Was it a place that you loved?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it because my dad was a bread man for a company called Quebeco Bread.
Okay.
And he used to leave the house at 4 in the morning or something, and sometimes he'd take me with him as I was getting older. And I'd ride with him. He drove almost 100 miles a day and serviced the bread to all the little shops and stores out in the country and crossroads, places like that, and within an area around Corning. And I love walking in that bakery in the morning on the mix of gasoline and baked goods. I know it sounds silly, but it was a pleasant combination, and they change every once in a while. And of course, once I got in the truck, all I could smell was hopefully what I would get later, a cupcake.
So with that much traveling, you actually saw a lot of the area in a short period of time, hundreds of miles.
Yeah, he went up along the. And then when he went to Bath, he worked for NBC there, in their bakery, and we'd go all up and down the Finger Lakes and cross over the mountains there and do the mountains between them, and, or the hills, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. And then when I lived in Guyana, it was 7 miles over to Penn Yan, where I went to junior high school, 7th and 8th grade. Yeah. Then we moved to Arizona.
Well, but speaking specifically of your time in Penn Yan, people may not know this, but you were responsible for their mascot.
Yes, they had a contest, I think when I was in, one of the 2 grades, 7th or 8th. And I used to love to draw horses. Yeah. And I loved horses. And so they wanted somebody to name the team and everything. So I put in, drew a horse and called it the Mustang.
Yeah. Still called the Mustangs today.
It's still there today.
Yep. When did you pick up guitar? Was it while you were in the area, or is that when you moved to Arizona?
No, that was when we moved from Corning to Bath. And I didn't know it, but my dad had an acoustic guitar, and we were loading some coal into the new house for the furnace. And I looked over. I said, "What's that, Dad?" He said, "Oh," he looks, he says, "That's a guitar." "What's it for?" He says, "Will you play it like a musical instrument?" And he says, "I used to court your mother."
Did you know right away that you were going to take to it? I mean, was it one of those things you just couldn't put down?
Well, I asked him to show me how it worked, and he played it 3 or 4 chords, which was about the limit of his knowledge on it, maybe 5 chords, something like that. And so I could, he taught them to me, and I just kept playing, kept trying, and hurt my fingers. They had to grow calluses. Never really did, but they did get tough.
Oh, sure.
And, anyway, I could play several chords. I didn't know you could play up to neck for the longest time without doing anything. And
that's fun.
Well, I used to play and sing "Happy Birthday" for the neighbor kids and things like that. And then in the 7th grade, I think I sang a couple songs in an assembly at Penn Yan.
Oh, wow.
And let's see what else. Oh, went to Hormel.
Oh, yeah.
And did a radio show. I took 2 or 3 lessons on the lap steel.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I wanted guitar, but my folks liked the Hawaiian guitar, so that's what I got lessons on. But I only took about 3 of them, and then I just rebelled. Did not want to go. But during that time, because everything he taught me I could play instantly, it was just natural for me. And so he took me with him to his little 15-minute radio show, and we played Missouri Waltz, and I played the lead on that.
Yeah.
And,
Did you know that that's what you wanted to do as a career at a young age, or was it just a hobby at that point?
It was just a hobby. I didn't know that even after I started working at 15 in Arizona.
Yeah.
We moved to Arizona in 1951, and in Tucson, and then my dad went to work for Safeway there and worked his way up to assistant manager, and a year or so later we moved to Coolidge, which is a small town halfway between Tucson and Phoenix.
Okay.
And they had a radio station, and this guy my dad, of course, being a dad, said my son plays guitar to the disc jockey when he came in to go shopping.
Yeah.
And disc jockey, Jim Doyle, said, well, bring him out to the transmitter, we'll record something, and
Yeah.
if it turns out okay, we'll put it on the air.
Yeah.
He did, and that started a whole thing.
So your parents were supportive of going into
Oh,
to
yeah.
music? Yeah.
Well, in those days, I don't think they expected me to earn a living out of it. But after they played that on the radio, a friend called, Jimmy Dell, and he called up and he said, come to my house and play music. And he played piano and I played guitar, and we sang together country songs. And so we did that around the area and just had fun with it, parties and stuff, school dances, whatever. And then, let's see, trying to think where I was going with that.
Well,
Then after that, this local country group called and wanted me to play with them at the VFW, and they said, it pays $15. I couldn't believe that in 1953 or 4.
yeah.
To get $15 for playing the guitar just seemed ridiculous. But I knew all their songs and stuff, and solos on the records, so I said we rehearsed it, and then we did the gig, and that started me working.
Was country your biggest influence? Is that who you listened to? Country music?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Hank Williams was my man.
Yeah.
A guy, my mentor, sort of, and from him I learned. Just by observing and listening, I realized he was doing his own style, his own sound, and he did it with authority.
Mm-hmm. Is that when you realized you had to come up with your own sound? You had to be different than everyone else?
Well, all the country artists did.
Mhm.
You know, I could hear the first 2 bars of any new song by a country artist and know what it was just by the sound of
Right.
the intro, the steel guitar, or they had different tones and things. Or the guitar,
Yeah.
and the fiddle, and whatever it was, they had all had their own sound. Hank Snow did,
Sure.
Lefty Frizzell, and you could just tell them about just a couple of bars who it was going to be before I heard the voice.
Yeah. We have to take a short break, but Duane Eddy's promised he's going to stay with us through the break, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services interview, and we're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio. Duane Eddy is our guest, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, Musician Hall of Famer, and recent Steuben County Hall of Famer. Congratulations.
That's the one I'm proud of. I don't know, there's something about your hometown recognizing you that's better than all the rest.
I'm sure. Do you still have connections to our area?
Yes, I do. I have some friends in Scottsdale, Arizona, that their family's up in Penningham.
Oh, wow.
But other than that, and of course, my relatives are all in Towanda and Alba, Pennsylvania, just 20 miles below the border.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousins and nephews and nieces.
What was it that brought your family to Corning in the first place? Was it the bakery job?
Pardon?
What was it that brought your family to this area in the first place? Was it the bakery job that your father had?
No. He had 3 brothers, and they grew up in Towanda and Lakeland. They were born in Lakeland, which no longer exists. South of Towanda, it was a lumber town. They clear cut it, and then they picked everything up, all the buildings and the railroad tracks, and left it a meadow, which it is now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So before we went to break, we were talking about kind of the beginnings of getting into the guitar. When did you feel that your career had taken off?
Well, I didn't know. You never know from record to record whether it's going to last.
Sure.
But I cut late '57. There was a record called Raunchy that was a top 10 record by 2 different artists and a guitar instrumental. And so by then I'd met my producer. He came to Coolidge as a DJ.
Okay.
And then wanted to be a producer, so he became one. And he got one hit in 1956, Sanford Clark, The Fool. And he wrote and produced. And then in 57, he wanted to try an instrumental, so he said, go home and write one. And so I did. And it was called Moving and Grooving.
Yeah.
They released that in January, and it got the Billboard charts of 70-something,
Wow.
which encouraged them to say, go back and do some more, which we did in March, and just past March 16th,
Yeah.
not long ago, which is the day we cut Rebel Rouser, and that was released in April or so, and somewhere around there at the end of April, I think. And it became a big hit of the summer,
Yeah.
pretty much.
It's amazing to me. I don't think there's any movie that takes place in that time that doesn't include Rebel Rouser.
Yeah,
It's
seemed
so
like
synonymous with that time.
fine with me.
Keep
I
them
love
coming.
hearing it in a movie. Forrest Gump was the biggest one. They sold over 14 million albums of that soundtrack.
Wow.
We had a little help from Elvis,
Yeah.
Colby, and others.
Well, and you mentioned Elvis. You've had an opportunity, I'm sure, to meet just about everybody in the business.
Just about,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I had a very nice experience with Elvis.
Yeah.
We tried to get in the show, and we couldn't. It was sold out, but we went in afterwards, and this was a friend of doing. And so we got backstage afterward, and he invited me, and I met him, and that was nice. And he said, come on up to the penthouse. We're having a going away. This was his last night.
Oh, okay.
Going party for all the people that worked on the show and all that sort of thing at the hotel. So I did him up. Of course, I knew all his musicians, had worked with him for years.
Sure.
Sat and talked to him for a while. And then here he came, and he came right over and started talking to me, and we had a great conversation, and it continued off and on, because he would interrupt it to go greet people and talk to them, and his manners were impeccable.
Yeah. Isn't it?
Southern gentleman is a Southern gentleman, and
Yeah.
you can't duplicate it.
No.
But he was treating these people so nice, and they just were loving it.
Mm-hmm.
And but he'd work his way back to me, and so we talked. And he and Priscilla was there too. He and I and Priscilla talked to about 7 in the morning, and finally he had come down from the show.
Yeah. Wow.
He asked me. He said, "Did you see the show?" I said, "No, we couldn't get in." He called me.
Yeah.
Because I got some influence around here. And I said, "Well, I would never presume."
Yeah.
I would.
No. What is it like now when someone comes up to you and talks about how big of an influence you were in their career?
That's the reward I never knew I'd get.
Yeah.
And that's about all I can say about it. This is a wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
When especially somebody like John Fogerty or somebody
Yeah.
comes up.
Yeah.
16% of our playbook was Dwayne Eddy songs, and he tells in interviews that that he was the guy. Well, I was his guy for learning off of, and there's been several,
Yeah.
like that. Said I started playing guitar because of you. Ones that blew my mind, kind of, were two jazz players, bass and guitar player out at the Big Potato in California, Don Randy's place, and I went in one night, and he said, "You got to hear these guys; they're really good." And so I listened to them. They just play jazz.
Yeah.
Which I don't play it, speak of, but I like it. Listen to it now and then. And anyway, they both came up to me afterward, and they said they'd come from the San Fernando Valley, and they'd heard my records. And one guy said, because of those records, he says, I played bass, and the other one says, yeah, and because of those records, I played guitar.
Wow.
He said, we learned all your stuff, and then we progressed from there, went on, and became jazz. We had some training, and
Sure.
musical training, and learned about theory and all that, and then we became jazz players.
Wow. We got to take another short break, but we'll be right back with Dwayne Eddy. A lot more to get to, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. We're being joined by Duane Eddy. Duane, you've had such an amazing career. Are there moments that really stick out to you that are very memorable?
Oh, yes. First time I played the Hollywood Bowl in California, that was one. I call them moments, first time I worked with James Brown up on the Northwest. He didn't have any hits then, but his show was so good.
Yeah.
I when I could, I'd ask the promoter to let him close the show.
Yeah.
Because I felt I like to do that anyway, because instrumentals didn't seem as strong as vocals in some of those live shows.
Yeah.
They were powerful and strong, but they'd been singing, they'd been hearing vocals the whole show.
Sure.
When I come out and play instrumentals, it's nice to have a vocal actor, so I always encouraged that. But James was knocked out with it. He thought that was the nicest thing could have happened to him, and he knew he should have been there anyway. But the shows matched him up, and so that was a moment. And playing the Grand Ole Opry in 1996.
Wow.
For the 17th, that was a childhood dream. I never knew how I'd do it. But
yeah.
That was a dream for me, and one of those moments. And I got to play with Chet Atkins.
Oh, wow.
And we played a Hank Williams song together. So
perfect. When you play the Grand Ole Opry, I know you've played all over the country and all over the world. Is it still a little intimidating to play at the Grand Ole Opry?
No, it's oddly enough, it was before I played it. But once I got on the stage, I found that it was the most comfortable stage I'd ever been on.
No kidding.
The acoustics are wonderful in there.
Yeah.
And everything sounds great, and it just has a warmth, friendly feeling that from the audience and just the walls.
Oh, sure. Well, it's such a legendary venue. Is there a place that you've played outside of those but that became a favorite spot, maybe because of memory or just because you look at some of the bills that you played on, you played with everybody and they used to have the package bills. So are there certain ones that stick out for you on that?
Oh, yeah. I remember we did Dick Clark shows, TV shows in Binghamton.
Wow.
Far from you.
Yeah.
And I used to ride, they put me on these farm equipment things. I was in some kind of loader one time, and another time on a wagon being pulled by a tractor, and I don't know, things like that.
Yeah.
They were like the first music videos.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Isn't it amazing to think of how many legends were on each of those bills? And now, you look at the news and one star gets, $1,500 a ticket.
I know. I can't imagine.
No.
I can't imagine paying that for
No.
anything.
No.
A car.
I know. I don't think I've ever owned a car that's worth quite that much. But the talent back then and also the value you got for your money, it just speaks, I guess, volumes for the time that was taking place.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Well, just that, you look at the talent and the value at that time, it goes to show you that maybe the difference in the music video, or the music industry, maybe that's a better way for me to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And it is it's like a pickup truck used to sell for $1,800.
Right.
Loaded. And then they became 18,000, and now they're 80,000.
Yeah.
It's
just amazing. If you look back at the beginning of your career, if you could tell yourself something now, back then, what would it be?
Get a better manager. No, I don't know. I probably would have. There's several things I would have done different, not too many.
Yeah.
And because I just didn't know a lot that was going on in those days. But and I was losing a lot of money. I knew that, but that's another story for another time.
Sure.
And, but I can't think of anything. I got to meet Richard Blue and act in 2 Afghan World Travels.
I love it.
plus the Thunder Drums with him and Charles Bronson.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, Arthur O'Connell.
Yeah.
So I became friends with Charlie and with Dick. And Dick I stayed friends with for 20 years. 61 till he passed away in 81.
Yeah.
So those are all moments.
Amazing.
And, I'm trying to think. Everly Brothers, I worked with them and produced Phil's first solo album for RCA. Another highlight, another moment, and it's just been. I went to Nancy Sinatra's birthday party one time in Frank, and
Yeah.
all these people were there, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think sometimes I just, you know, kind of like knock on wood or whatever.
Yeah.
And I wonder, you know, well, my current producer calls me the Forrest Gump of rock and roll.
And the irony of your song being in Forrest Gump is pretty amazing, too.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that because I just fell into these situations and met these people.
Yeah.
I met all of Rat Pack.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Sammy Davis and Dean Martin, and got to hang with all of them.
Yeah.
And, so it's been exciting and fun, and then there's some music. I got to play
Yeah.
with the best musicians in the world.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
Everybody from Paul Schaefer to Paul McCartney.
Yeah. And we're going to talk more about that on tomorrow's show because we're going to take another short break, and then we're going to play the second part of this interview tomorrow. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Well, that does it for us today on Frankly Speaking. I hope you enjoyed the best of Frankly Speaking. We are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We got to talk with Don McLean, the Oak Ridge Boys, Richard Sturban, and of course, one of our all-time favorites, Duane Eddy, born right here in Corning, New York. As always, please reach out to me. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Any questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms, or suggestions for upcoming guests. I always love to hear from you, whether it's maybe your mayor or someone on your town council, or maybe a celebrity or an author. Just let me know by reaching out to me at that number, or you can email frank@wydctv.com. That's frank@wydctv.com. Boy, it's hard to believe how fast this program goes, especially when you have such great guests. We've had, the program's only been on since March, and we've just had so many amazing guests to pick from for the best of. So I appreciate everybody who's taking the time out to be on Frankly Speaking, whether it's to promote a concert or promote maybe their new album, or in this case with Duane Eddy, just to say hi to all the people of Corning. And we really do appreciate that. But again, always reach out to me. And I thank you for watching the best of Frankly Speaking. If you're new to the program, we're on 7 a.m. every weekday morning right here on Big Fox. We look at it as kind of like talk radio on TV. We focus on local, national, regional. Some days we're talking international. But we can range all the way from your town council all the way up to presidential discussion. So tune in every weekday morning starting at 7 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV Big Fox. Have a great day, everyone, and we will be back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox starting at 7 weekdays. I know I keep promoting it, but please reach out to me. The phone number is at the bottom of the screen. I'd love to hear from you. And that does it for us. Went awful fast this morning. So again, thank you for joining us. This has been Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. We'll see you soon.